What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another Sunday Scan. I hope that everyone had a great week and weekend. We have a great episode of Sunday Scan up for you tonight. We're going to go over a lot of the recent moves, and we're going to have on a special guest, Tim Grittani, to go over his personal watch list for the week ahead. So we're going to pull up a bunch of charts, go over a bunch of individual tickers, and really map out what the plan is for the week. So make sure that you stick around to the end of the episode. A couple notes of housekeeping before that is we have Traders for a Cause coming up, the regional event in San Diego, July 17th. So if you haven't gotten tickets yet, you still have a little bit more time to do that and to hang out with some great traders like Lance, Kyle Williams, and I think Greg Shabika is also going to try to attend that event as well. So it's been a super busy week. We've had Bitcoin reaching new all-time highs. A lot of the crypto stocks and the sector have been running with it. So that's been one of the most in play themes that we'll really touch on later on in Scan. So that's been a big event. And then also we have a few other more macro things coming up, like it's Q2 earnings season. So you're going to have a lot of names start to report, especially banks. They usually kick off earnings season. So that'll be a big one to watch. And then you also had some new tariff announcements from Trump against the EU. And that was announced over the weekend. So we'll see how the markets react to some of those things as well. And then finally, we also have MOPEX week. So the monthly options expiration week is the week that we're going into right now. And so a lot of times, especially during bullish markets, that tends to be a good week to look for a lot of reversions. So maybe it's with the crypto sector, maybe it's with some tech names, or maybe it's with something else. But we'll talk about that all in IU as it's playing out throughout the week, and we'll share that. And just a couple more notes is that, the team in IU and the community there has really been doing a great job using the tech this week to do, this past week to catch some of the biggest moves like BMNR. We had, a filing come out for dilution, and that was picked up, the second it dropped in IU. So that was a huge alert right there. And then that, got people prepared to be able to play that unwind as well. And a few other things like we had some good trades on PROC. PROK, which we talked about it, having some trappy action and really just walking through a few trades like that in real time, showing where is it soaking, what's the level you could risk off of, what are the signs to look for if this starts to squeeze up a little bit, and then really just giving step-by-step commentary along the way. And that's really what IU is all about. It's people bringing their best ideas, the best technology, and just forming a community around that to really help trade the markets better. So there's never been a better time to get into IU. So make sure that you check it out if you're not a member yet. So before we bring on Tim Grittani, I will give the disclaimer that neither of us are financial advisors, and these are not buy or sell recommendations. Everything that we're going to talk about is for informational and educational purposes only. Now let's get into Sunday Scan with Tim Grittani. All right, we're very happy to have on the legendary Tim Grittani on Sunday Scan. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Chris. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So I've been wanting to get you on Sunday Scan for a while. You've transitioned back into the market. You've been a lot more active this year. So we'll touch a little bit about what you've been seeing, what you've been noticing, and then we'll get into our watch list, our market thoughts, and everything. So really, what's that been like to fully dive back into the markets this year?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a challenge just because it's like I'm a baby deer learning to walk. Like I feel like I'm kind of starting from scratch in some areas. So it was really a matter of I just had to embrace all the outside of market hours work. Like where it's like, okay, I'm logging mistakes again. I'm writing down the best opportunities from every day. Like in hindsight, kind of trying to redirect my attention to the areas that seem like the easiest opportunities. But mostly short selling because I barely short sold for the last 5 years. So, that's something I definitely want to be able to get back into heavily. It's just a matter of doing it safely, avoiding some of the crazy China squeezes, stuff like that. So yeah, it's just been, a lot of work, but also a lot of fun because it's, doing it the right way makes a big difference.
Definitely. And I feel like that's a good reminder to a lot of people that, even once people have reached a lot of success and, they're professional traders and everything, you still have to keep doing that, the work outside of market hours, still doing the scanning, doing everything. And so it's not like a one and done process. It's an ongoing thing that everyone has to keep doing. And really what a good market cycle that you've really come back into this year. I mean, small caps are going nuts. We've had crazy moves in SPY, both down and up, and a lot of macro things going on. So what do you focus on the most when you have a lot of things moving? Are you drawn more towards small caps right now, or large caps, or a mix?
I'm drawn more towards small caps just because that's where the most volatility is. And that always really was my basis for narrowing down plays when I felt like I had huge watch lists. It was, okay, what's the most volatile? What might have the biggest range move? Most liquidity, although, I've made sure to come back in with modest size. So the liquidity is not as much of a concern as it would have been 5 years ago. But yeah, every morning it's just a matter of looking at the watch list I made the night before and seeing how things are gapping, what's closest to my ideal plan. And then when the bell rings, I'm trying to just keep my focus on maybe my three favorite.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a lot of good names on watch for this week. And I know that some of the ones that we were chatting about, you have BMNR, which was huge, both up and down over the last week or two. We had things like ABVE, which was a super trappy name. You've had incredible squeezes and things like INKT, which was up 700% on Friday. So, a lot of range for these names. And what I've been noticing too is a ton of volume. I mean, the float rotation or the volume on some of these names is incredible. 400 million volume in some cases, and some of these stocks only have a couple million float outstanding. So that's a recipe for some huge range. So are you gravitating towards a certain type of name right now, like with that kind of volume, or is it more just whatever's moving, whatever has range? If you have a setup, you're there.
Mostly whatever's moving, but if it's tied to a sector, it gets extra attention from me, more from the long side usually. Like right now, Bitcoin is the big hot thing, and all these crypto treasury stocks. Seems like we get a few PRs every week from those. So, if I see something that falls into that bucket, that definitely gets the bulk of my attention.
Yeah, and I remember that even from, I think, 2022, when you came kind of semi out of retirement for the oil stocks, the small caps that were running then. And I think especially on the long side, it helps to really have that theme as a tailwind, because it's not just one stock trying to drum up money or attention, but there's money looking to be deployed into those sectors. And so it's a lot, I don't want to say more safe, but you have a lot more of a tailwind doing that, with crypto or with drones or with whatever's moving, really.
Right, and it's so helpful because it's not just like, oh, guess the random PR that's going to run today. It's you get something like BMNR, and then everybody is just looking and waiting for that next one that announces crypto treasury news, and there's going to be buyers there. So it's just a matter then of defaulting to your favorite patterns and trying to trade it in an intelligent way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, whenever you're ready, we can pull up some charts, go through some names, and just chat about some reviews or some names on watch for the upcoming week.
Sure. Let me get my chart up here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we were just talking about BMNR, and this is something I do have on my radar right now. I'm waiting for the day that it has some kind of reversal bounce play. This is a little bit off of my ideal situation just because of the massive amount of dilution that's present. They announced, I think they're selling up to $2 billion worth of shares, and that was on Wednesday morning. And you can see it's been pretty much straight down since then. So when I'm looking at a situation like this, I'm looking for a change in behavior. You can see how, the day it gets announced, it's just straight down, no kind of morning high break. Then day two of the fade, we did have this nice midday ramp here, and it did not quite break the morning high and then faded off. And then gap up on Friday, probably mostly due to the fact that Bitcoin was up so much overnight. But again, morning high holds and it just fades all day. So as this keeps on putting in red days and fading further and further, obviously the lower the better. But I'm looking for that change in behavior, reversal type action where, what is the first day that we have, some kind of morning high break? And I'm going to be buying it into that strength. And, I'll be careful not to overstay my welcome, again, because of the dilution and because it could just easily get sold into, I feel like. But also if Bitcoin keeps on running, this could be a very short-term catalyst where we could see a quick 20, 30, 40% plus bounce. And so that's really what I'm looking for. And, if it really squeezes enough, then, great, maybe even a reshort.
Yeah, definitely. And especially with a name like this, if they're tapping an ATM, I think it's really monitoring the day for when it starts to feel trappy, when it starts to feel like that selling stopped for the moment. And even if it goes on for a couple more days or something, I feel like on a name that's unwound as much as this has, you have a lot of people have made a ton of money short on it. There's probably huge amounts of conviction, probably very large size. So just paying attention to that one day where it starts to feel a little bit lighter, like they're not tapping that ATM or that supply is kind of shut off. And then you have a reversal situation where now everyone's in crowded shorts. They're not tapping the ATM and it starts to get trappy. And, we've seen some incredible squeezes in this market. So that's a great one.
Right. And then let's just keep on the crypto names for now. Some other ones I'm watching. SBET is probably one of the most similar, where it did have the huge initial run, and then of course they had to issue a bunch of shares to raise all the money they wanted to raise, and that has actually been in the process of rebounding over the past couple of weeks. We're up from about 9 to in the 20s now. And it's been very choppy action. I've had a couple trades on it here and there on the long side, and I really haven't gotten much out of it. I probably would have been better with just a buy and hold approach, although I don't typically do longer term long swings. So at this point, I think that I'm going to concede that I've probably missed the long and just wait and hope that it can get really nice and extended, maybe back up into the $30 area where it had this big gap down from. And then, if it's a matter of 2, 3, 4 great green daily candles in a row, then again, looking for the change in behavior, looking for the first red day. And then I'll be jumping in on the short side on this.
Yeah, definitely. And, just really having, Nate talks about this a lot, having the price of Bitcoin up, or Ethereum or whatever these companies are involved with, and having that as a very close, correlation with all these names. And when anticipating a first red day or when looking to join a trend or anything, just aligning yourself with that can make a huge, huge difference, especially since, with these sector trades, everyone's looking at the same couple of things. And I think a lot of people are making the same judgments based on what the crypto itself is doing.
Right. And as we watch the Bitcoin price here, I think as we're filming this, it's around 117.5, holding up pretty well. But, nothing to say that, we can't get some great sector squeezes as it continues to run, if it is able to head higher. So stuff I'm watching more on the long side. One would be SQNS, which unfortunately shook me out of a long on Thursday. But these are the kinds of daily charts that I like. I need to actually change my time frame here just to get a little bit better of a view. But that's not even going to do it. I was looking at a weekly. But we're at the point now where it has eclipsed the only real major volume day in its history. And yeah, this is a weekly chart right now. But I love these stocks that are essentially in the hot sector and in blue sky territory where, the breakouts and the squeezes can continue to get more and more powerful. And so SQNS, right now, not the most ideal daily chart just because it's a few big green candles in a row. But this 550 level is of huge interest to me. And if we can put in a little more consolidation, maybe midweek, get the 550 break. I'm definitely not going to let this fall off my radar. You can see I've got a price alert in for if it gets back over 5, just to make sure I get my eyes back on it. But this, I think, has the ingredients to be a potential squeezer on some kind of 550 breakout. I'm hoping that it sets up in an ideal way for it and doesn't just all happen pre-market one day.
Yeah, for sure. So those breakouts, that's been a great pattern this year. So what would you say have been your top 2 or 3 patterns that you've been focusing on? Is it multi-day breakouts with sectors and first red days for shorts?
It is multi-day breakouts for sure. Whether it's with a sector or not, I'm usually trying to play it. Although the way I'm going about it now is we see so many stocks that spike straight up into breakout levels and then fail. So typically in that situation, I'm letting the spike happen. Let's say that this has some big straight up morning spike on Monday morning to 575 or 6. I'm not chasing that. I'm not buying the 550 break into straight up strength. Rather, I want to sit back, give the stock a chance to top, consolidate, and then if we get some kind of intraday high day break later, I basically treat that as confirmation and that the pattern will continue, and then I'm buying that with a set risk point on the chart.
Awesome.
And
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the only other pattern I can really say that I'm focusing majorly on and I've had the most success with since I've been back is just the multi-day short type setups. The things like BMNR, CRCL, those big extended dailies that finally have the big breakdown day.
Yeah, CRCL, CRWV was another one. I know Nate was swing shorting that one. So some of these recent IPOs that were some of the hottest ones, restricted float on the way up, eventually had those giant blowouts. And then I don't know if they had some unlocks happen or something, but total change in character. Now they're just really pretty cleanly unwinding. I mean, back to some pretty key levels.
And while we're talking about CRWV, this is another one I'm watching into next week. Same kind of thing as BMNR, the lower the better. And I'm looking for a change in behavior for a reversal long. And what exactly that will look like, I can't say yet. But I hope we get a couple more red days and a setup for a nice bounce opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And then you were talking a little bit about ABVE, a little bit of a frustrating ticker, had a ton of traps and squeezes, but this has been on your radar, right?
Yeah, ABVE, I just have struggled with this one all week. On this front side here, I was trying to short lower highs a couple times. I took a couple losses. And then I thought that I recognized this little fake low day crack here under the 125 area. You can see how it did this little wick under and then save. And I recognized that as a potential big trap for continuation higher. I was long from about 128, I think. And I sold it about half an hour before close and never got back in on the long side. So after that, I got pretty tilted with the ticker, struggled trying to short it on Friday, flipped my bias to long a couple times on it. So it's one of those tickers that I've just let take my lunch money and I've overtraded. So, still all that being said, I'm going to, I'm taking the weekend to, mentally untilt here and try to come at it with fresh eyes. And really the way that this has behaved, it's one that, you've got to buy weakness, you've got to sell strength. That's my philosophy on it. And every time I've done the opposite is when I've lost. So now we look like we're setting up for a nice potential gap down Monday morning. And the way these guys operate, it wouldn't at all surprise me to see them do some kind of a quick squeeze green, maybe. So I'm going to be looking at it for a short still. I'm going to be very short biased on this on Monday. But it's a matter of waiting for the appropriate entry, shorting into bounces pre-market, if anything, shorting into a morning spike, if anything, after the open. But I'm going to make sure that that short is into strength. And then I'm going to probably set my risk around this $4 area, depending on exactly what that Monday morning pre-market action looks like. Like all this I'm saying, I'm envisioning a gap down into the $3 area or 270s.
Of course. That middle part of the chart that you were talking about where it was getting pretty trappy, that pattern right there has been something that I've been playing a lot in this market on some different names. And really what I've been seeing is that you have, these low float stocks with huge amounts of volume and huge amounts of float rotation, where basically the volume traded on the day is, multiples of, 10, 20, 30 times what the actual float is. And that, float rotation basically just resets the tape over and over and over again. So if they wanted to sell any paper or something like that, it usually flushes that out. But they can get really trappy. And I know that this is something that Nate and I talk about, that after one of these stocks has a huge move up in the morning, and then they do that all day consolidation sideways, they look like they're going to break down, they get saved. They look like they're going to break down, they get saved. And then they start creeping up towards the highs. Those have been triggering like crazy. And a lot of times they'll make a symmetrical move of that first leg of, and maybe not totally, but pretty similar, at least visually. But that has been something I've seen, not only on this name, but on even things like, what was the one? BMNR, more on like a daily time frame, and a few others too. So just that, the big move up, the consolidation, and then, a lot of float rotation, and then coming back up to those highs, that has been triggering a ton in this market.
Right. Yeah, that fake breakdown that doesn't actually break. And I agree with you. That is something I've been seeing a lot of. And it's really something that I need to put together some kind of detailed tracker on because I really do think that, like, even if it only works a third of the time, the risk reward is so absurd there that it's really something I'd like to systematize.
Definitely. And then you were mentioning PROK as well. Is that one that you traded a little bit last week, and it's also
That
for next
is,
week?
yeah. I was driving all day on the first day that it ran, so at least I didn't get into trouble on the short side. Although I wish I had maybe been long some. But then let me see. It's just another one. I feel like this one was a little frustrating to me because on Wednesday I don't remember doing a whole lot with it. If anything, I might have had a small long around the time it got past 550. And I don't remember if I shorted this. If I did, it must not have been any kind of noteworthy size. Otherwise, you'd think I'd remember it. But Thursday, Friday, it's another one where I've been looking for it to break down, looking for it to have that nice first red day, and it just hasn't quite happened. It held really well on Thursday and even squeezed out a little bit, topped out near 6. And then when it was gapping down Friday morning, I thought, oh, for sure, this is the day. Now we're finally gapping down. But again, it was just a less than ideal, very choppy action. So this is on watch into Monday. We're getting to the point where I'm thinking that maybe it can ramp back up and have some kind of a breakout. And I think over 6, over 6 is where I'd definitely flip to a long bias and start thinking about looking for entries to get long for a possible leg to 8 or 9 or something like that. As far as a breakdown and a short goes, I mean, at this point, we've got the support built in the low 4s. So it's hard for me to envision much of really wanting to go after this too aggressively on the short side, especially with volume drying up. I mean, maybe I'll take a shot on a 4 breakdown, but it's getting a little less exciting as a short to me now. I just hope it has another leg up.
Sure. And I know that I think there's some kind of catalyst coming up with it as well next week. They had a press release, so maybe it's been hanging on a little bit more than usual leading into that, although I'm not exactly sure what that catalyst is. And then you also mentioned this INKT. So this was a massive, massive mover on Friday, up 700%, had some, kind of cancer news with it. And again, that same pattern of low float stock kind of shorted short crowded, and then a lot of float rotation and just an all-day grinder, and then seemed to do like a lower volume kind of walk down into after hours there.
Right, massive move, million float, I think. And yeah, that was a nice little fake breakout they had in the afternoon here and unwound it. So yeah, it looks like we're on track for a nice gap down here. I would hope that Monday morning it's a relatively stress-free unwind opportunity. But again, with the lower float, biotech stocks, you've got to be careful. So this is another one similar to ABVE, where my approach on the gap down will be, watching it pre-market. If it's still gapping down Monday morning pre-market, I'm looking for bounces to enter. I'm looking for those moments of strength. After market open, I'm looking for some kind of, like maybe it opens strong out of the gate and I can get short off of, the mid 60s area, or maybe it opens weak and has some kind of a decent morning bounce. And then I'd be looking more like shorting into that bounce, risking off of whatever the morning high was. So there's a few ways it could present itself, but I'm going in with a short bias for sure.
Yeah, and then how do you think about volume on some of these plays? So you have a massive, huge volume day on the first green day, and then what comes to mind when you're looking for a gap down or something? Do you want to see still heavy volume, but just lower than the first day, or how are you thinking about that? Or even if the volume were to dry up completely, go from 40, 50 million down to 1 million, and now maybe you have some T+1 situations where you might have to get some buy-ins. How do you think about that?
Right. I agree completely. Like, with the gap down plays, almost always you're going to see a huge drop in the volume. And I would expect the same for INKT. Now, how illiquid it is exactly, that's something I'd be figuring out in the first 30 to 60 minutes of the trading day, after regular hours market open. And if I get uncomfortable with the liquidity, then my plan usually just becomes, let's just pay myself into the morning weakness and move on to the next trade.
Yeah, and then would any, if it were to reclaim key levels or something like that, would you ever flip bias to more of a long bias on something like this? Or if it's up so much, you just don't feel comfortable, having a long bias on something that's already, up 700%?
Oh no, I definitely could see myself getting long biased again, if it does reclaim. Not on Monday. I really don't like the gap down plays that squeeze back, the day after they put in the high, because in a lot of those cases, yes, we see some powerful squeezes, but from what I remember, at least, they're almost always short-lived squeezes where it's a big push, maybe through green, maybe through previous day high, and then it unwinds a lot of the day after that. So ideally, for this to make me long biased again, we need a day or two of consolidation and then the break. Similar to what BMNR did. Although it's a completely different sector, it's kind of a similar float and price range.
Yep, I was thinking the exact same thing with that BMNR, almost exactly.
And BMNR actually was long for the breakout. Sold it way early into the breakout, but still, just to show you, it doesn't really matter to me how much it's up. If we get that basing action and it looks like it could go again, yeah, I'll definitely flip bias.
Yeah, and that same formula of very low float stocks, super high float rotation, and then maybe 2 days of consolidation, and then creeping back towards those highs, maybe some buy-ins, and that would could potentially have a big move. But that's a great point about not trying to rush that, because if you only have partial covers, or if it's not that trappy yet, then it's just going to stuff right back into resistance and then putter out, as opposed to keeping shorts in there, maybe building some conviction and then shoving them all out at once.
Yeah, I would almost say, like, if I did have some kind of pre-market or morning short that I got squeezed out of on Monday, I'd be fully rooting for it to go to like 80, 85, something like that. And I'd be watching it so closely for backside after that. Like I'd be looking for a hard crack and then a bounce that I could just re-short right into.
Yeah, for sure. And then you also had MLGO. Was that the one?
Oh yeah, MLGO. That's right. This one, it's one that I am paying attention to with the hope that they can drive it back over $1 with a couple green candles, because they held it decently on Friday. Maybe it was just in sympathy to hollow. But what this has going on is this is one of those ultra toxic dilution plays, similar to dries and tops back in the day. I don't know if you remember those, but it's just that they have these convertible notes that keep issuing note after note after note for tens of millions of dollars. And the conversion is something like 70% of the lowest 30-day VWAP. So it's the people on the other end of that deal are getting an insane deal, and have no reason not to just sell and take their profits every single day. So MLGO, I actually had a short on this back in May, after we had these two big green candles in the first red day. And I just swung it short for a couple of weeks down to the low ones, I believe, before I covered finally. And now it's been under $1 for a while. It's starting to rebound off of 50 a bit. It's been a choppy rebound back. So I'm just looking for some kind of extension again where I can get short into that first red day for another swing play on the short side. And then also, they just recently approved another stock split. So we've seen in the past what awful action stocks can have when they finally say, oh, here's the ratio of our split and the day that we're going to be splitting. It's almost always big after hours drop, and then almost always even further drop when they finally actually do the split. So I'm going to be waiting and looking for that. And I really don't mind swinging, like, yes, it's a China name, but I don't really mind swinging one like this overnight, because it is just constant massive volume. Every single day, tens of millions of shares are trading, and just notes are being converted and converted and converted. It's a little bit different than Hollow, where Hollow has pretty much the exact same deal with tons of toxic convertible notes, but their float is much, much lower and much scarier. And that's how you get these, big gap up days like this. And so I don't feel like there's that same threat with Milgo if they do put out a press release or something like that. Whereas Hollow, it's just a couple million shares a day. And, between that and the low float, there's not a whole lot protecting you from a big 60, 70% gap up.
Yeah, and that the lower insider ownership with some of these China names that have already liquidated, and now they're more just kind of the dilution machines and everything. It really does change the profile as opposed to something that's very tightly held. They're trying to trap shorts. They're going to do their big blowout and then liquidate into it. This is a very different late stage. This is much closer to almost like a Mullen. Or MULN or something like that, as opposed to the classic China liquidation trades that are much earlier on in their life cycle.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Mullen's another great example of one where, my gosh, somehow I've never really shorted this thing, and I'm going to have to remedy that eventually, maybe after the next split.
Well, if it ever goes back to highs, I think it'll be the largest percent gainer in the world. So,
yeah, really.
Yeah. So any other main watches, or if not, we can switch to a couple of market comments. What else you got on watch, Tim?
I'll double check my list really quick, but I think we have about covered it. Just the only other thing that I think I missed was back when we were talking crypto, FTFT. And I would compare this to SQNS, where it's a very similar kind of thing where the only real big volume day overhead we have is back from March, and it was up near, this one should be able to show it, pre-market. Yeah, it was up near, okay, so it was about a $5 high. And if you go back even further beyond that, again, it's basically blue skies above that, where all this action is just on light, nothing volume. So if I'm looking for a potential, sector runner, to run along with Bitcoin in multiple stages, this is another one that is a big contender for me, even though its action was a little bit less than ideal on Friday.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just such an important concept, like you're talking about, to stick with the in-play themes, or unless you're anticipating a theme becoming in play. But that's where the volume is, that's where the range is, that's where the action is. And we were just recently talking to Greg Shabika, and he just, I don't remember if it was on the scan or if it was before the scan, we were talking, and he was saying even an idea as simple as, the stocks that make the biggest moves are the stocks that have recently made the biggest moves. So whether it's a big runner up to a big runner down, or something, or a sympathy or something like that, but just sticking with those in-play themes, just it really can help the expected value of these trades. Because if someone's risking 10 cents or 20 cents or something like that, but it has no range, the expected value falls so much, versus you're risking 10, 20 cents and you can make $1, $2 on the exact same theoretical setup, but because your sector's in theme, it really, really helps.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll say with FTFT is I really do like how that pre-market high 480 was pretty well aligned with that $5 high from back in March. So now we've got, that kind of confirms the significance of that level to me. So again, another one, I'm basically watching it for a multi-day breakout. It's just, does hopefully a couple days of consolidation before we get there. And hopefully it happens, as Bitcoin is heading higher as well.
Definitely. So those are all great watches. I have a lot of the same names on watch. I'm going to talk through just a couple of more macro things. I don't know. Do you pay attention to some of the macro themes in the market, or more just the general direction?
I barely look at the macro stuff, to be honest with you. Like as macro as I get is what's Bitcoin doing.
Sure. Yeah. So just a couple of things that are on my radar, very, loose watches, as you have Q2 earnings season coming up. So you have a lot of banks and things like that reporting this upcoming week. And then you had Trump talk about some 30% tariffs on the EU. So I think that could be another kind of macro thing that spills into the markets. And we have a couple other things related to that, but I think those will be the two main drivers over the next week of just if the market's going to change character at all, those could be some potential drivers behind that. So before we wrap up, Tim, just a couple of notes. So coming back to the market like you have this year, you mentioned that you really haven't put on a ton of risk, but you still have been able to do extraordinarily well just by sticking with your setup, sticking with your theme. So can you talk about approaching the markets again from a very reasonable amount of risk and still being able to do well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I owe a lot just to the market environment that we're in, first of all, because there just have been some absolutely insane opportunities. So even with small size, you can accomplish a lot like that. But it was necessary for me, because in the past, when I've surfaced to trade, coming out of retirement, it's always been kind of begrudgingly like, oh, I don't really want to be doing it, but there's a good opportunity, so let's trade it huge to make it worth it. And then, emotional decisions take over. So it's just trying to be as systematic as possible and just earn size, after a couple weeks of, not having to log much in the mistake journal. And
Yeah,
I'll get there.
definitely. Yeah. And then do you anticipate really like trying to, put that massive amount of risk back on, or do you feel pretty good about, keeping a moderate risk and just enjoying being back in the markets? Or what do you see for the rest of the year and, beyond for yourself?
So part of the reason I'm back is because I didn't feel like I necessarily accomplished as much as I could have in the past. And I kind of let myself, I stopped sizing up. I got to a point where I stopped sizing up, and I sort of said, oh, I'm not really comfortable anymore. And I want to have some growth beyond that point. So ideally, I get much larger than I ever was before. But again, I have to earn that. My account sizes have to be right for that. I can't just jump in with both feet. So as I am continuing to progress, the results are going to guide me. First of all, am I making lots of dumb mistakes, like not cutting my losses? Because if I have a week where I'm not cutting losses well, or I'm afraid to lose, so I'm exiting trades before my stop is hit, then that tells me I need to keep my size where it is until I can, mature enough beyond that point to stop making those mistakes, and then I can take the next step up. So I think I can get there. I think it's going to be a bit of a process. Also, I need to be having green months so that my account is growing with it, because I don't want I don't want to be taking 20K risk on, a $400,000 account or something. That wouldn't make any sense. So the account is going to have to be growing, and the mistakes are going to have to be low. And as long as that's happening, then we'll just keep on taking steps and see how far we can push it.
That sounds great. And it's really impressive, just the amount of discipline, to see you putting in action. I mean, after all these years, it's very impressive, because I feel like a lot of times after people get past a certain point, they feel like they kind of loosen their rules and everything like that. But you seem like you're just very dialed in and really going about it, the same way that someone who is even newer to the market, like they have to be really, really disciplined with that. But to see you kind of carry that through your, very long, very successful career, it's very impressive. And, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on Sunday Scan. And I'm excited to see what's going to play out in this week ahead. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen for the rest of the year and with your growth.
Thanks, man. Yeah, looking forward to the coming week and rest of the year. It should be a fun ride.
Definitely. All right, Tim. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the market.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you want to trade live alongside me and other members of the Investors Underground community, then check out investorsunderground.com to see if becoming a member is the right decision for you. They have some of the best technology and a lot of great members there, all looking to help other people improve their trading. And also check out Investors Underground content on YouTube and Twitter. Thank you.